everybody, this is Perch, and this one I read this comic thinking I'm reading all the comics. I thought I'm not going to do a review on this, and as I was reading this comic, I'm like, oh, I should do a review on this because it's painful in a lot of ways. And then by the time I got to the end of it, I'm like, you know what? I don't care. There's nothing I can really add to the conversation around this comic. I didn't enjoy it. Like, what am I? But I didn't hate it. I just like, you know, and that's not a good video. Like that'd be the entire video. Is Tim is, you don't need those noises. So then, a day went by, and I did some other things, and finally, slowly, my mind wouldn't let go of this comic because it was, I don't know why. So this is Unearthed. This is the Jessica Cruz YA story kind of comic. And this is part of DC's comic line, like I Am Not Starfire and the others that they've done. Like, I love how this is clearly an indication of how well they've done. It's like the most recent one and the rest of them, the others that have gone on, the Nubia and the Beast Boy and Raven one and the others. It's sad because that the Wonder Woman one for kids, the Young Wonder Woman or Young Diana, or I don't remember the name of it. That was good. Superman Smashes a Clan is a solid one. Primer is a good one. There's some good ones in there. Anyway, this Unearthed one is written for the older side of YA. So every time I talk about YA, people come in and goes, well, YA isn't. YA technically, by how they describe it, is from ages 10 to 18. That's the category. However, most YA is older than that. Most YA is like 14, 15 to, whenever you don't feel embarrassed reading the book anymore. So older. This one is definitely for the older crowd. This is like a late junior high school type one. It's written by Lilian Rivera, who's won some awards for doing some other kind of YA novels. And then it's illustrated by Steph C., who's a Mexico-based artist and has a very unique style and everything else. So this book is basically, it's Jessica Cruz, and she's in high school, and she's an undocumented immigrant or an illegal alien or however you want to, wherever you want to go in that spectrum. She's one of those. And she does not have superpowers or anything else, but she's, trying to get through school, and she's got a lot of pressures on her, the least of which is living in constant fear that she's going to have ICE deport her and take her away. And so she meets John Stewart. That's the other character that's kind of in this book. And that's it from the DC universe. You got kind of a teenage John Stewart and a teenage Jessica Cruz, and then you really don't have anyone else to speak of in this book in terms of the Green Lantern kind of mythology people. I kept expecting them to throw Hal Jordan or Guy Gardner in there as ICE agents, but they didn't do that. I feel like they wanted to on some level, but I also kind of feel like maybe the author didn't, probably hasn't read a lot of DC. I may be wrong about that, but anyway. So this book is, you'll see some other videos on this about how offensive it is. You'll see angry people. But unlike some of the others, unlike Nubia, unlike I Am Not Starfire, this book never really pretends to be in the DC universe. There's a nod to DC, and there is one really, I was left conflicted at the end of it, because I think this is clever, what they did. But, so basically what I think was somewhat clever about this, and I have very mixed feelings about the art. So the art is at times extremely difficult for me to look at and deal with. Jessica Cruz's shape changes from an 80-pound girl to a She-Hulk level 250-pound hulking thing randomly from panel to panel. Like how she's drawn is all over the place. It's she's drawn sometimes very boxy, sometimes very waifish, sometimes she's just and I kept kind of trying to think, is the artist doing this to kind of reflect the moment? Because here's the smart thing that the art does, and it really I do think is clever, is they take the emotional spectrum of the, willpower, the green, and fear yellow, and rage red, and hope blue. And what they do is the artist uses color for when Jessica Cruz is feeling one of those emotions. They bring in the color into the panel, and they start filling up the background and some of the things around the character, and they do that very effectively. I will say it was effective uses. It is one of those things that once you notice it, it's completely on the nose. You see exactly what they're doing, but still, the artist maintains some subtlety. They don't just immediately paint things red. It does a very good job of reflecting the character's emotions in color, and that's really the only kind of nod to the comics that exists. Beyond those things, the fact that you have a character called Jessica Cruz, you have a character called John Stewart, and you have the emotional spectrum that more or less maps to the colors identified in the comics. Nothing else in this entire YA novel has anything to do with DC and the characters, the Green Lantern mythology. And really, that's probably why this book is not as irritating as some of the others, because it never tries to connect itself any deeper than that. For all intents and purposes, if you didn't know who John Stewart, Jessica Cruz was, this would be a comic graphic novel about a young illegal alien, undocumented migrant, Jessica Cruz, who's worried about being deported. That's what this comic is. This comic is there's no other nod to Green Lantern. Now, somebody in the comments is going to come in and be like, "You missed the entire thing where the Guardians are." Maybe I don't know. I'm not going to go back and read it a second time to look for more Easter eggs, but I don't think they're there. The comic basically sets up that Jessica Cruz is going to school. She's juggling a lot of different things. Her friends are, typical teenagers, but Jessica Cruz can't enjoy herself as a typical teenager because she knows she's undocumented, and that could cause her to be deported at any moment. Her parents are also undocumented, but they're hard workers and they're good family people. The comic never introduces undocumented or illegal alien workers who are criminals. They never go into any of that. All the people who are in the country illegally are good, hardworking family people trying to do their best. And I mean, they're the good guys in this comic. And ICE is portrayed as the bad guys. And in particular, ICE is behind them. There's this councilwoman who wins an election of some kind, who is really going to crack down on illegal immigrants and homeless. What's weird is they insert homeless in here, and they have the characters talking at various moments about how it's wrong that the councilwoman is against the homeless, but they never really show homeless in the comic, and they never really, or I guess the unhoused. I don't know what's Captain America calling them now. Anyway, they never really go into any of that. It's just they keep bringing up like she's against the homeless, that monster, but they don't really ever identify why, or she shouldn't be against homeless. The comic doesn't even go into like what the alternative plan is for the homeless, and this is one of the weird parts about how the homeless is being treated in modern politics anyway, because it's like you're either supportive of the homeless or you're against the homeless. But if you're supportive of the homeless, there's no plan. Like it's like you shouldn't be against the homeless. It's like, all right, but probably not good for them to live in a tent on 2nd Street and start fires. In Seattle, we've had got hundreds of fires. Literally, just no exaggeration. It may be thousands, but it's hundreds of fires from homeless encampments because people are trying to stay warm. So they start a fire, and then you're starting a fire on the side of a street in a tent. So obviously that's going to cause problems. But anyway, no, everybody's like, we can't talk about that. It's like, but maybe it'd be a good thing if we didn't have fires. But whatever. So this evil councilwoman is kind of the big bad. They don't call her Sinestro, or maybe, and now I'm thinking about it, was her name some analogy for Sinestro? It may have been. I don't know. But anyway, she's bad. And then the comic does this weird thing where kind of midway through the graphic novel, She stops being. They just start calling her racist because she's against the homeless and the undocumented people. But the way the art is drawn, it's like she looks like she might be Latina, but maybe not. I who knows? Or she's why I that this character, they create this villain character in a senator, but you never really deal with this senator. She's on TV commercials and billboards as somebody running for office, but we never really she doesn't sneak into Jessica Cruz's house and steal her cookies or anything. She just kind of, we never actually really see her do anything but be interviewed. But she just represents one more area where she's bringing fear to Jessica Cruz, who's living in this constant state of panic that she's going to be deported. So sure enough, the dad gets deported. And then she goes and lives with a helpful immigrant's family who lives nearby, who I believe is Asian. So while she's doing this, of course, she's really good at school and she's getting some kind of bizarre work study thing at a museum. It's unclear exactly what, she's really into that stuff, but you can't really tell what for or what the purpose is, other than she's into it. But she likes Aztec mythology and statues and everything else. So she starts to have these dreams where the various deities in this Aztec mythology come to her, and some are, there's the god of war and the god of hope and the god of willpower and everything else, and then they correspond to the emotional Green Lantern spectrum, and that's kind of the tie. So, these are all in kind of her dreams and everything else. This comic works better if you just view it as a teenage girl who's going through wild emotional swings, and the colors of the emotional spectrum are kind of brought in as she's angry or sad or hopeful or trying to do various aspects. One interesting thing about this comic is that when they go to make the other enemy, the ICE agents, the main ICE agent that arrested her dad was also Latino, and so she, there's this whole dynamic of he's betrayed his people, and so she's really angry and she wants to go get revenge on this Latino ICE worker. But I give the comic credit; they didn't go for the obvious, there's a dumb hillbilly white guy who hates people from Mexico, and he looks kind of like a cross between Donald Trump and some of the Trailer Park Boys, and they don't go for any of that. It's this character. Now the whole conflict that gets raised is at one point the ICE worker, this Latino ICE worker, is chasing a hardworking undocumented migrant who has a fruit stand, and Jessica and Jon Stewart kind of help her escape by wrapping the ICE agent up in chains. That's kind of a very bizarre kind of piece here, but the comic doesn't have, in terms of the narrative, if you compare it to other things DC is doing, it doesn't have this big climax moment where the supervillain has to be defeated or anything else. It's more just the comic is about Jessica Cruz trying to harness her fear and get to where she can function. And the comic does, weight way too heavily the whole aspect of, the right thing to do is we'll go out and protest and make our voices heard. And I think I'm waiting for this whole moment in comics to kind of people to burn through that, because this is probably where I'm Gen X, and I feel like I speak to Gen Y at times of everybody knows. You don't need to go raise awareness about ICE, but this comic spends a bit of time doing that. We need to hit the streets with our signs and say no to racism, and it's fine. But this comic is, again, I think you're going to see some very, very hot takes on the internet of this being this thoroughly offensive book and everything else. But it really is. I mean, the second you detach it from having any connection to DC, the better. Jessica Cruz, the character in this comic, looks zero like Jessica Cruz in in the main DC universe. Jon Stewart looks nothing like him. The only connections are the names, and the names could be applied to anyone. In fact, they are. I mean, Jessica Cruz, as I mentioned, is pretty much every possible female and male body shape in this comic are used to represent her at different times. And the colors of the emotional spectrum of the Green Lantern rings come into play, but even then, not all of them. Like there's no purple lanterns ever show up here. No zombie lanterns. No white lanterns. That's just kind of ignored. So it's barely. I mean, again, you would be you could very easily not get at all that was connected to anything DC related at all. It doesn't need to be, and I think most people who probably buy this book will never know that it has anything to do with DC. I guess there's one more piece. The dad has a green ring, and the green ring is just a green ring, and she wears it around her neck for a while. So there's that. As I mentioned, the art is I think the color use is really good in this comic. The pages look very they do smart things with the color to make characters pop and stand out and everything else. The art itself, I want to support this artist way more. I really do, but the Jessica Cruz character, it really is like all over the place in terms of how she looks and everything else. And some of the other characters, there's this friend who shows up who I can't tell if she's white or Latina or why. You can't tell. It keeps kind of shifting. And I think they were trying to draw her with freckles on her face, and they just like for a while I'm reading this book going, is this character, are they trying to make this character kind of, trans because, and this is stubble on her, like it's bizarre how like the freckles do not work. It just looks like she's sprouting hair all over her face at various times, and it's every time that character shows up, it's just bizarre. It's a very weird style choice, but anyway. So the art, like I said, I want to like this comic more for the art because again, there's some really nice color wash and other work going here, and some very smart choices, and some daring things. Some of the shots are from odd angles and everything else, and I really want to respect that detail. But the character work is just at times bizarre, and that it becomes extremely distracting. For Jessica Cruz, it becomes extremely distracting. But in general, look, I mean, this comic, if you are a comic fan, if you're a Green Lantern fan, there is zero reason why you would want to pick up this book unless the concept really sounds appealing to you. Like, there's no reason to pick up this book as a fan of Green Lantern or a fan of DC Comics in general. This comic is going to appeal to libraries and people at this age group who really aren't into comics but want to read about, I don't know, a girl's struggle with her emotions, and fine, that's what it's going to do. But in general, as I said, you'll get a lot of hot takes on this comic, and a lot of them are going to be from people who are comic fans who read comics and are going to completely not know what to do with this. And you're not wrong. It's in the simplest possible way. This is definitely not for you. It's not. If you're a Jeff Johns Green Lantern fan, this is not going to appeal to you, just flat out. And in many cases where it's being sold and everything else, it's not trying to. So that's what I mean. It's this comic kind of came and went. DC did not choose to hype it or advertise it really at all, and it kind of just slid into the background. And I suspect that's kind of where it will land. And so, I mean, if DC wants to put out a book like this, I mean, sure, they're going for a market. My question would be, are they getting the comic where this market exists? So are they getting it into Scholastic or libraries? And I also give it credit. At no point in this book is there a school shooting or some bizarre thing. The various conflicts exist really with Jessica is scared of being arrested, and then she gets angry. She doesn't go to school for a few days. There's consequences shown. She doesn't go to school, and she gets kicked out of a club and can't do other things, and she gets in trouble for that. There's no point where an ICE agent just kind of runs into the school and starts mowing people down with a gun or anything like that. So I mean, this comic, even though again I think a lot of people will get pissed about it, it didn't fall into any of the stupid stuff that Nubia did, or even I Am Not Starfire. It keeps it's fairly straightforward story. You know, there's no romance angle. They kind of tease a friendship between Jessica Cruz and Jon Stewart, but they don't get into that any of that at all. So from a young adult sold in schools perspective, this comic is probably going to be the most palatable. I think that there's going to be some people who will be certainly pissed at the portrayal of ICE and kind of the very hard stance it takes, saying, undocumented, people, undocumented Americans are, they very carefully never use the word illegal aliens. They never go into any of kind of that. So you are signing up to a book that is about how, people who are here in the country, undocumented people who are here illegally are, hardworking, good people, and they're, and the reality is some are and some aren't, and that's how it goes. But the book definitely, that's probably the hardest political stand it takes. But otherwise, it's about a girl, who's has a lot of fears and how she overcomes that. And again, not for me. I didn't enjoy this book, but I have to say, if we're tallying up, lessons learned, good for DC. You did not commission a book that has things in it that would cause a school to refuse to carry it, or a parent could give this to their kids, and they would probably have issues, or may have issues with how illegal immigration is handled. But other than that, there is no there's none of this other stuff that gets people all wound up. So I don't know. What do you do with this? It's not for me. It's probably not for you, the person listening to this video, given this a comic channel, and mainly they're people who collect and read comics on it. But if small victories, is that where I'm going with this? I don't know. Sure, there you have it. Thanks. If you read this book, let me know what you think in the comments below. Again, it's an odd thing. It's just an odd kind of book. Thanks for listening.